You are now watching The Meech.
Hey guys, and welcome to Treasure Trove. And in true Demeech fashion, we will be playing a specialty on the channel, an unfinished game. You might be wondering, why do I sound so cheery and excited to play an unfinished game? Don't I hate them? Well, guess what? This is the case where it's like the Forbidden Banana. Diddy Kong Pilot never released. I'm not even supposed to be playing this. But this game, specifically, has a very interesting history, and the fact that I'm able to play it is just insane. So let's get into the game itself, and then we can go over the history. You can see at the screen, we have the selection of Team Kong and Team Krem. We'll start off with Team Kong, because this is Diddy Kong Pilot, and the structure of the game is very similar to that of Mario Kart, where you have different cups and 4 different tracks per cup. There's also a boss at the end of them, but considering that this is Diddy Kong Pilot, I think it's only appropriate to play as Funky Kong. The best character in Mario Kart, and still the best character in Donkey Kong. He is my favorite Kong. You know it, Funky Kong. So, what exactly is this game, and how am I playing it? So for those of you who didn't know, Rare was a company that worked on the Donkey Kong series throughout the 90s, and they're most known for the Donkey Kong Country games, but they're also known for classics like Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, just all kinds of excellent games. I would say that Rareware made some of the best Nintendo games. All the Donkey Kong Country games are better than any of the 2D Mario games. That should show you right there that 2D Mario not only needs a refresh, but just how good Donkey Kong Country is. And I'm one of the few who actually really like Donkey Kong 64. Although I will say Banjo-Kazooie is the better game. But unfortunately what happened is Microsoft, who had the Xbox release back in 2001, they bought out Rareware. And this could be a good thing if that meant, oh, we'd get more powerful hardware, we get to play Banjo-Kazooie in glorious HD, but no, it's nuts and bolts, I don't want to play that! So, the Microsoft acquisition of Rare was pretty much nothing but a bad thing. And it's unfortunate. I don't know why they haven't made a proper Banjo-Kazooie game in the longest time, because it's clear there's demand for it. The Ukulele Kickstarter to make a spiritual successor to it, the fact that it took off as quick as it did goes to showcase that, yeah, there's absolutely demand. I mean, for goodness sake, even Capcom got the message people wanted new Mega Man games. Then they had Mega Man 11, which is a pretty great game. But essentially what happened here is that, likely due to Microsoft's acquisition of the game, it never released. It did in the sense where it was reworked into Banjo Pilot, which you might be wondering, why is Banjo Pilot a thing? Why were they allowed to make a Game Boy Advance racing game with Banjo-Kazooie but not Donkey Kong? Well, the thing is, Microsoft said that Rare could not make a game based on a console. They couldn't make GameCube or Wii games. But they could make handheld games since they weren't competing, hence why they made the remakes of the Donkey Kong Country games and the Diddy Kong Racing remake. But I don't understand why they reworked Diddy Kong Pilot into Banjo Pilot, considering that if they were allowed to make handheld games, why not just release a Donkey Kong game? The only explanation I can think of is if they were trying to turn Banjo-Kazooie into their Mario, or something like that, where it'd be their de facto series. Man, I would have loved if that happened, but how did this game surface? What exactly happened? Well, this is a case where the game leaked in the sense, not in the Jeff Grubb way, but it leaked in the actual sense where it was mysteriously showcased in some videos all the way back in 2011 by totally not an ex-Rareware employee. And then mysteriously, not even a month later, the game itself surfaced. So it's been in circulation for quite some time. But that is an absolute win when it comes to preservation, and it's also a rare situation where a Nintendo game that was either cancelled or some prototype actually was preserved, which is always great to see. The notable example that comes to mind besides that is Star Fox 2, which eventually did get released, but in this case, it's kind of weird because, yeah, this game got reworked into Banjo Pilot, and I played Banjo Pilot, and you can easily tell that, yeah, it's a reworked Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong Racing game. But, you know, I will say, it's nice to have the original version, and I would have loved if it actually turned into a series. But how is the game itself? Because as I stated before, I'm not even supposed to be playing this. It's unfinished, and it was never released. But surprisingly, this game is actually very competent. It's unbelievable how far this game got into development. If I had to estimate, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the game was complete. There are glitches. You might be noticing that I'm avoiding the boost for a very specific reason. I might not be able to get in first place, but I'm saving your eardrums because what happens is there's a glitch that causes an audio loop when you get stung by the bee. Then it loops and it sounds awful. An audio loop. Wow, Diddy Kong Pilot has a lot in common with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But as I said, the game's actually pretty competent, which is surprising. You can see that it is similar to Mario Kart in the sense of it being a racing game where you use items, you are on different tracks, and, you know, just the basics of a racing game. But the main difference is that this is not a kart racer, but you're using planes. Diddy Kong Racing also had something similar, but there was also the option for karts and boats. But this is all just planes. Plain and simple. And the control feels pretty good. I'm not sure whether they decided to make it a plane racing game because it would be better controlling. Because if you played something like Mario Kart Super Circuit, the controls of that game are just, they're not good. They're very hard to get used to. And even something like F-Zero Maximum Velocity, I think it's called, the first one on the Game Boy Advance. That game right there, it was very hard to get back into as well. But that was made by ND Cube, which I find it hilarious, because ND Cube, it just seems like they rarely ever get anything right. I don't know how they got the Wii Party series right, but just with Mario Party, they kept on falling on their face and flopping like a fish until Mario Party Superstars. But even then it was like, okay, we can't make a good Mario Party game, let's just do what worked before. And that is for the better, by the way. So in this case, the control is really good. The game itself is competent, just needed more polish. Like I said, there were glitches. I'm wondering if they were going to have a sort of adventure mode like they had in Diddy Kong Racing, or if this was just going to be a standard racing game. But there's a lot of potential for this game to be quite good. And if this game actually released, it probably would be one of the best racing games on the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, I know Diddy Kong Pilot's a thing, but it just is not the same as a Diddy Kong Racing game. And I love Banjo-Kazooie, but this is definitely more suited for the Diddy Kong series. So let's get into the presentation, because that is another thing that Rareware games are known for. And this is no exception. This is a very nice looking Game Boy Advance game. I believe it uses Mode 7 to sort of render 3D in the sense of where they couldn't have true 3D, but they kind of went for a pseudo 3D style. And I will say that the other tracks look far better than this. Like I said, definitely needed more polish, but you got all kinds of cool stages here. The sunset ones look quite nice. Music is pretty good. Sound effects are good, although I do think they need more work. And like I said, the audio loop, that glitch, if you deal with it, it can kind of ruin a race. But I'm wondering if there's a patch or something that fixes it. Now, that right there, speaking of glitches, one just happened there. So I think you've got a good sense of what the Funky Kong portion, or the Kong portion of the game is like. But as I stated before, there is also the Team Creme section. So before wrapping this up, we're going to play a race as K. Rool. But overall, I'm having a pretty good time. And despite the game not even releasing, it still is pretty competent. And they sell reproductions of it, which is one I have. I got it back in 2020. But I have an Easy Flash now, which I highly recommend because flash carts are just better to get in the long run. You can put all kinds of games on them, and they just work better most of the time. You don't have to worry about stuff like save data corruption as much. If you get a good one like the Easy Flash, then you're good to go. And then you got things like you'll be able to use Game Boy games on the Game Boy Micro, which is very cool. I know it's emulation, but still. I think since we are very close to... Well, I'm not sure if... Yeah, you probably have to beat it in order to progress to the boss. But this is another cool-looking stage. It goes for the Rune sort of style. I believe Donkey Kong Country had levels like that. I don't think they were as prevalent in 2 and 3. Music is also great. It kind of reminds me of Banana and Ruins from Mario Kart Arcade Grand Prix. So from here, I think you get a sense of what this is like, and to end things off, we will be playing as K. Rool. The man, the myth, the legend himself, the king. Seeing him in Smash was just such a great reveal. I think that was one of the best ones out there. Pac-Man's still my favorite, but still. I hope for the next Donkey Kong game they bring back K. Rool. So when you're playing the Kremlin Cup, you get to play as Critter, Claptrap, who is essentially the Koopa Troopa of the Donkey Kong Country series, Clump. I kind of want to play as Clump now, but we got to play as K. Rool. And they all have voice lines. It isn't full-on voice acting, but, you know, considering that this is Diddy Kong Racing, why not do the Diddy Cup? First stage is Rapid Sands, which I believe is a beach. Because I have not seen a place with sand and water that isn't a beach. This is the more difficult cups. Instead of going for like 100cc, 150cc, they went for the Kongs versus the Kremlings, which I find very cool. So when it comes to the game itself, what do I think? I said the gameplay was good, presentation's good, and it seems like it was going to have a good amount of content. Or content, if you will. I do think that it would have been one of the best racing games on the Game Boy Advance. I'm not sure if it's a racing game that I would consider to be one of my favorites, like Crash Team Racing, or even something like Mario Kart DS. But it definitely is a serviceable kart racing, or plane racing game for the Game Boy Advance, even in a state where the game is not complete. It definitely would have been cool to get this, but if you're really interested and want the definitive experience, you'd probably want to go for Banjo Pilot. I know I said the Diddy Kong aesthetic is better for this sort of game, but that is the full game and likely what the vision was for Diddy Kong Pilot as a full game. But, like I said, checking the game out, I would highly recommend it. You got nothing to lose. Well, anyways, guys, that about wraps it up. If there are any games you want me to cover on Treasure Trove, I would love to hear them. But in the meantime, keep Kong and Dada on.